Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third panel here at the Yass Prize celebration. It's so amazing to reconnect with the Yamily, as we like to say in my cohort, and see who else is coming into the fold as winners of this amazing and prestigious prize that you never know where it's going to lead you. um, I have experienced so much amazing growth since winning the Yass Prize in 2022. We expanded our own Arizona Autism Charter School network and have grown 2 campuses. We are expanding into healthcare by building the state's first and only autism-focused primary health clinic. Yes. And creating programs and services that span the lifespan of people on the spectrum by creating workforce development programs and apprenticeships and partnerships in the community so that our kids have the opportunity to be fulfilled, productive citizens, as is what all parents want for their children. So the topic of our panel today is making America's children healthy again. And the leaders on my panel have been doing that for the existence of their programs and their schools because, as all of us know, when we receive students into our special schools, we are not just receiving them to offer them academic programming. That is the goal. But there are sometimes bigger fish to fry, as they say, when children come to our schools and they're not well. And as part of my new role at the Department of Health and Human Services, it's amazing to have urgency around this issue of making our children healthy, and healthy so that they can learn and thrive in their communities, in their schools, and in their futures. So my first co-presenter is Dr. Laura Cassidy. I always like to say she and I are cut from the same cloth because her daughter inspired her to start Louisiana Key Academy, which has grown into a network of schools serving children with dyslexia. And Mike Long from Sail Future, I think he runs everybody's dream school. He reaches children and students through sailing programs so that they open their heart and their mind and are able to access academics. And we have Kate Eberle Walker, who is CEO and founder of a teletherapy company that is helping to assist with the backlog of services that children need in special education in district schools, private schools, and all types of educational settings so that children can get what they need to access learning. So I will start by throwing a question to each panelist to share how your school and your models and your enterprises are addressing the whole child in terms of helping them be well and well enough to learn. Starting with Dr. Laura.
Hello. It's great to be here. Great to see all these new faces. And like Diana said, welcome to the Yamily. So Louisiana Key Academy, they're charter schools for children with dyslexia. And ideally, we would get them in the first grade because that's when we can help them the most to acquire their reading skills. But we often get them we get an onslaught in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade and beyond. So we'll take a child in the 7th or 8th grade, even if they're reading on a 2nd grade level. But I think for dyslexic kids, the push is to identify them at the end of kindergarten, the beginning of 1st grade, because their self-esteem is formed in those early years. And I published a study in the Journal of Corrections, went to a maximum security prison, and tried to randomize prisoners. It's hard in a prison. But we validated a previous study, and half of the inmates that we screened and then tested are dyslexic. And we looked at dropout rates and we also talked to them. And it was interesting because I thought most of them would have dropped out in high school. A lot of them dropped out in middle school. And what they told me is, you know, my mama knew I needed more help in first grade, or I was put in special ed in second grade, or I was ready to leave school in the first grade. So that's what we are about, is really helping others understand that early identification is important, not just for academics, but for the child's self-esteem.
Dr. Cassidy, I love the incarceration statistic. So at Sail Future, we work at the intersections of foster care, education, and juvenile justice. And there's a really well-known survey, similar to the one you mentioned, where they go in and in the adult prison population, 80% of inmates in America were involved in foster care as children. And so it's one of the clearest pipelines that you can see. Our kids face really challenging childhoods, right? More than half of our kids don't graduate from high school. 30% of our kids are homeless by the time they turn 21. 71% of female youth that age out of foster care are mothers by their 21st birthday. There are some pretty incredible health-related statistics that are very scary when we think about our foster care population and what that means for them as adults. And so when we think about our work, especially in a school model where half of our kids are in foster care, the other half of our kids are at risk of coming into foster care or have open cases, we can't just think about teaching math, science, reading, civics. We do all of those things, but if we do it through textbooks and traditional learning, none of our kids would show up to school. So that's why I get the coolest job in the world, which is taking our kids sailing around the world on school ships. Our 11th grade students go to work to 5 different employers throughout their 11th grade year, 2 days a week. Our 12th graders earn $10,000 their senior year to do a paid apprenticeship as part of their senior experience. We have embedded therapists in all of our programs in schools that have caseloads that are 15 or less. So they have really strong relationships with each of the kids they serve. So this idea that a school needs to be more than just a place of academic instruction, but also a place that meets all of those needs of the children they serve is a really hard thing to do operationally, but we see some pretty incredible outcomes that hopefully I'll get to talk about later.
Okay, so you have therapists carrying caseloads of 15. At Presence, we have therapists coming to us wanting to join our network who are working in schools and might be asked to carry a caseload of 80, 85 at the low end, upwards of 100, 150, right? So at Presence, what we do, we have a national network of therapists who are providing services to special education departments. So a lot of what we see and do is we help serve the children who already have been identified as needing an IEP, and our network will, via teletherapy, meet them where they are and give them the necessary speech therapy or occupational therapy or behavioral mental health services. But increasingly, the other part of our work is getting to be more and more significant, and that's the evaluations that these clinicians do, including school psychologists, to determine if a child has a disability, if they have a need, what do they need to be equipped to be successful and reach their potential in whatever school or educational model they're in. And we are seeing, this year we sometimes come into a district that might have a backlog of thousands of children and families who are overdue and are waiting to have an evaluation done to determine what they need. Do they qualify for an IEP? And so, we really are seeing and feeling the the consequences of that. Of course, we all know the longer that you go without being evaluated and without having that understanding of what you need, what supports you need, the more time and resource it will take down the line to catch back up and address it. So that's the work we're doing, is we're bringing our therapists in and saying, we can help schools. So about 15% of students in public education are on IEPs. And about 35% of schools today report that they have shortages. They don't have enough staff to serve even them. And I always say that's just the ones who are admitting it, right? I think 35% is low, and I think 15% is low. And so we are trying to come in and use technology as a connector to say, well, we have a network, and we can connect with your children, and we can help serve them wherever they are.
Thank you. The statistics are truly staggering. I remember when my son was diagnosed with autism, Sammy, the statistic was 1 in 150. And today the CDC says it's 1 in 31 children are on the autism spectrum. So anyone who serves kids is likely having to be creative and figure out how to serve the growing number of children with this type of learning disability. For dyslexia, 1 in 5. And so it is not just a problem for special education or for families. It's an issue that we all have to solve together and be very creative. And some of the models have truly been pillars of best practices, which is what Louisiana Key Academy is in the community that is served. But what are some of the policy barriers that are just stifling the growth of a specialty model that is truly needed?
Okay, so where should I start? So for specialty schools, just like most traditional schools, it's for charter schools that start up for facility funding. I mean, everybody, yeah. That is a barrier. We have looked and worked with people in other states, and one of the problems is, so Louisiana, we have School for the Deaf, we have School for the Blind, and Bobby Jindal was our governor, and he, after Katrina, New Orleans, as you probably know, flooded, and they found all the basically fraud, and it opened the way to charter schools in New Orleans. And then it let us in Baton Rouge start our first charter school. And the way I told it to them, dyslexia is a medical entity, and we're a school for kids with moderate to severe. These are kids that are failing in the traditional class. It's not like someone with mild dyslexia that needs a little bit of extra homework help at night. And but I said, we are a medical entity, just like being deaf or blind. And so they said, sure, you can have a school. But at first it was a little bit, no, you've got to take all the kids. But over time they said, no, you can just take the students with dyslexia. Because we get $14,500 per kid. We spend $21,500. So we're constantly fundraising. And that's why I said, you let other kids in, then we're such a specific model that it doesn't make sense to spend this money to have this program. But it's not translatable to a lot of states, because a lot of states won't accept that. They want you to be open to all students, even if you're a specialty school. The other thing is the accountability model. And we are labeled an F school. Now, it's interesting, we get renewed every time the charter's up for renewed. We've grown. We're opening our 4th school in August. We have full support of the department, but there are a group of people that believe in this accountability that must be tied to standardized tests, and it really is, I think, a disservice to our parents and our students and to the school itself to label us with the F. And everybody agrees with me in private, but when they're out on the dais, they're like, Oh, yes, we must have the strict accountability. And then there's the last thing I'll talk about. There's many more, but that would be the um, the proportionality or thank you, least restrictive environment. And what we tell people is the least restrictive environment for our kids is in our classrooms because they're thriving there. They feel like they aren't failing. They feel like they're not comparing themselves to others. And but I do know that that intimidates and hinders growth and startups.
Mike, and your school is a specialty school too. You serve students with high needs, students who don't have the natural supports, sometimes of a complete family, students who have been homeless, and your specialty is very expensive. So how do you manage? What policies help and what policies hinder?
So yes, what we do is quite complex. But everyone up here does something that's quite complex. I think our cost to serve a child in our educational setting is about $22,000 a year. We are so grateful to be a private school in the state of Florida that has a regulatory environment that allows, yes, we can clap for Florida. We don't always get to clap for Florida, but today we do.
Yes.
Without the incredible leadership of some folks in our state to design a system that allows for something innovative like this to exist, wouldn't be possible, right? Our state allows us to take kids on a sailboat to the Dominican Republic. We're sailing to Jamaica in a few weeks to do 2 weeks of hurricane relief work, right? That's their school experience, and we live in a state that created a legislative environment that allowed for that to happen. Now, not everything is perfect. Our step-up dollars, which is an incredible program, bring in about $7,700 to $8,100 per student. The students that come to our school were typically funded at $37,000 to $42,000 per student at the school that they went to previously because they have such a high level of need, right? So the disparity there, and then just the simple fact that we do it for half the cost, we'll pat ourselves on the back, it's pretty impressive. But the disparity is pretty severe, and it limits our growth and limits the number of students that we can serve because we have to go out and raise, through philanthropy, the difference between the step-up scholarship and the cost to educate our kids. So that's one. Another one, mental health funding is so backwards in this country, especially through Medicaid at the state level. The reimbursement rates just simply don't work to provide a high quality of care. That's why you have all of your great practitioners that work in private practice. We're fortunate to have some of them that come and do pro bono work with us because of the caseloads, because of the environment, but you simply can't provide high quality care at the reimbursement rates as they are, and the administrative burden to reimburse at a small scale. If you're a large provider with 10,000 clients, yeah, it may make a little more sense at that scale, but when you've got 150, it really doesn't. And so the administrative burden is huge, and there are a lot of things that could be done at the state and federal level to streamline that process to make that care more accessible. I'd say the third piece is Department of Labor funding that flows through the workforce boards. All of our students are in pre-apprenticeship and registered apprenticeship programs. It's part of the school experience. I was really happy to hear Nick from Octay up here trying to do things to streamline that funding so that 40% of it isn't lost in this massive administrative framework. So that way we can have students earning more wages and more students in these paid work experience programs. Because for kids that don't do well sitting down, I'm so proud of all of you because I had to get up and walk around. I can't sit still that long. Our kids definitely can't. But they love to go to work, right? And the more that the funding is available to fund seats for those kids to do that, the greater the learning opportunities are.
Thank you. And to Kate, in terms of policy, your work is super innovative. You can meet students where they are and offer the array of services through telehealth, teletherapy. But what are some of the policy barriers to that?
You know, a big topic on the last panel was interoperability between states. And I think that that's an obstacle that we encounter regularly in our work. We have our therapists available to do the work. We'll see the need, and when that crosses state lines, it can take a long time. It can be very cumbersome to take a school psychologist who's licensed in one state and go through all of the paperwork and process and credentialing to validate that that school psychologist can help a student in another state. And I came into Presence 7 years ago, and over those 7 years, there's been talk and excitement over interstate compacts for all of the professions that we're working with, and it's very slow, and it really does slow down the process of getting help to the student who needs it. So I think that's a big one. I think, something else that we have an interesting vantage point to is because we're providing these services into all different types of schools, right? So we work with a lot of large public districts, small public districts, virtual schools, charter schools, private schools. We see the different standards of compliance or requirements that each of those schools are held to access funding and to stay compliant. And it can be very, very rigorous outside of the traditional public districts for what these schools are asked to track and document and provide. I think that there's ways to take some of that friction out, to where I see that a lot of staff cost and resource in some of the schools that we work with, particularly in the virtual schools. It can take a lot of their time and resource. And so as part of getting all of our schools to be more innovative and allowing families to really be able to choose the model that works best for them and their students, I think we need to find ways to make it easier for some of these other school models to access the funding in the same way.
That's great. And I think what's really great about all of our models is that we create these models with the assumption that there will need to be embedded supports. Referrals are not good enough sometimes. You never know, like Dr. Laura said when we were chatting earlier, if you refer a family to a service like psychological eval or a medical service, dental service, you never know if they're actually going to go or what barriers are going to be there when they get there. So we, as their everyday educators, need to know that they're going to get the service. That's why in our model, we're just going to do the whole enchilada. We'll do the healthcare. We're opening a dental clinic, because sometimes you never know. We want to be proactive and not reactive when the kids are hurting over something physical. So in terms of the power of embedded services and the intersection of all the ways that we help children and families, can any of you speak to how that's really been life-changing for your communities?
I would say absolutely. We see that when you don't have embedded services and you can't really provide from the school those solutions for families, you pushing it back to a parent to need to be a case manager and to figure out who are all of the right service providers and to find them and to logistically make it happen. I do think that really makes it far less likely that all of those services are going to be obtained, and even if they are, to not be able to have all of those experts and professionals who are working with a child see what the others are doing and collaborate and communicate and sort of holistically keep track of what's being done and what needs to be done to best serve that child. I think when you fragment that out, you really aren't going to provide the holistic service that a student needs. And we absolutely see that students will be more successful when everyone's talking to each other.
That's right.
I will say, some people will ask us, why not just have the child in a traditional school and then they can go to tutoring after school? And a lot of kids do that. And so in dyslexia, we talk about the work of reading. They can learn to read, but they read slower because they read from the right side of the brain instead of the left. And it's a lot of work, so they're tired. And, if the school gives them 30 pages to read and then an essay, that's going to take a lot of time, and they're going to have their parents help. So the same thing, if they're expected to go to school and then get tutored after school, one, it prevents them from going to sports or doing some kind of community work or, socializing with their friends. And so what our program does do is it embeds that therapy. I don't really know why it's called language therapy, I guess because it's healing, but it sort of sometimes confuses people, but it's 90 minutes every day for 1st through 5th grade. And that way, they don't have to go to tutoring after school, which I think is a huge plus.
How many? Yeah, we can clap. Huge plus. How many parents in the room? Okay. How many parents remember when their kid got their heart broken for the first time by a romantic partner? Chris, you can stand up if you want to. So, one of my kids, I was a foster parent for 5 years. Sail Future operates a few foster homes where our kids live. Just got his heart broken 2 months ago. He's 22 years old, and it was the best thing that could have happened for him and I because he moved back in with me. So I'm really devastated for this poor kid because he's sad, and everybody knows that feeling. It just like tears your soul apart. But it has brought us close together because we haven't lived together in 4 years since he turned 18. And so we're spending all this time together, and I'm going to tell you his story to answer your question. He moved in to live with us when he was 13 years old. He stopped going to school in 5th grade, right? He would have been one of those 80% of adult inmates that wound up incarcerated as an adult. I end my day, like you, pretty late. I get home like 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and he'll be there on his laptop working through his college classes, and he works full-time as a car salesman and is doing incredibly well in life. And I can see where all of the wisdom that I got to impart on him as a father figure in our foster home is playing out in his life. I can see in his career working in car sales where the skills that he learned in his internships and his apprenticeships, one of which was selling cars at a dealership, are playing into his life now, right? I can see how the support system of having all of those embedded services, including therapy, including captains and engineers that he sailed around the world with, are nurturing him and supporting him today, all these years later, right? So now we've got a kid that moved in with us at 12 whose life was completely redirected, right? Our ability to do that is because we have those services embedded, because he had a place that was safe to live, because he had a school that inspired him to come to school, because he was doing cool things that he found value in. He was able to develop these skill sets that have now set him up for the rest of his life.
Wow, super powerful, and would have only happened for those circumstances. Yes, so I think my last round of questions here is going to tie it back to the MAHA agenda and making kids healthy again. I'll tell you one of my most recent MAHA stories with my son, Sammy. So Sammy is level 3 on the autism spectrum. That is the most impacted level. And we did a lot to support him and always knew that when he was eating better, when he was getting exercise, and when he was stimulated sufficiently, he just had a better day. And so when I set out to open our schools, it was always through the lens of, what are the kids consuming? What's their food like? We didn't have a school lunch program at first because it was so there were so many hurdles to get into the National School Lunch Program. So the kids would bring their lunch, and I would see their little lunch boxes only had Cheetos. There were kids that had such food selectivity that they would eat the same crackers every day, and it was just crackers. And so over time, when we had the capacity to have a school lunch program, it was better. At least, there was a protein, there was a starch, there was milk, cow milk, which was a big problem for us because a lot of the kids have milk intolerance, but the government program required us to serve milk, and there was no way around it. But it was a more balanced meal at least. Later, then that became not good enough, and the state of Arizona instituted legislation that required the schools to not serve food that was harmful to kids. So elimination of ultra-processed foods, and students who needed special diets were afforded those opportunities. And what we saw in our kids was nothing short of amazing. Behaviors, drastically improved. Gut issues and health problems drastically improved. And so, that is such an important payoff that, we want to do more. We want like nothing but the best clean food for our students because they're eating this every day, and education programs for the family so they can continue that at home. So for Sammy in particular, we noticed that, and this is an issue with a lot of special needs kids and programs, is that the rewards are sometimes food. And so, over time, Sammy was not fitting into his regular stretchy pants. So we said, we are not buying bigger stretchy pants. We're going to track his food on, Weight Watchers. So he lost 30 pounds. He went from having one seizure a month, which were terrible grand mal seizures, to, knock on wood, he hasn't had a seizure in 6 months. And so this is not just, students with disabilities and special needs need to improve their nourishment, their intake, their stimuli, not just, to, be better. It's truly for health improvements that are really non-negotiable. Because in too many cases, we see kids with learning disabilities, and as they become teens, they have diabetes and comorbidities that are truly preventable and reversible with the right nourishment and the right activity levels. And we as school leaders are mindful of all of that. We're almost at time, but want to get your closing thoughts about how it is that your programs, your schools are truly making that health impact that is going to carry students to truly thriving futures.
Well, since you mentioned school lunches, with the support of a Yass Alumni Award, we were able to renovate an existing building on our campus to not only be an auditorium and cafeteria for our kids, but there's a commercial kitchen where we prepare 1,000 student lunches a day. So we serve our school and 8 other schools. Our students, wait. Our students are the ones that are making those lunches. And the profit that comes from that social enterprise offsets that difference for scholarships, so our students can attend the school for free. So healthy food makes a huge difference. The nutrition, both just how that affects the gut-mind connection is big, but it's also a massive motivator. And we use that a lot in the school store. So healthy food matters quite a bit.
For us, I'll give an example that is about really paying attention to the mental health and wellness of a student first to be able to do some of the other things we're trying to do in our program. So I was just talking to someone the other day, a speech pathologist, who told a story of working with a boy in her school who was, he had severe severe language disability, was nonverbal other than making a few sounds, wasn't able to speak any words. And she, for months, was trying different therapy strategies, and it just wasn't working. The therapist he'd worked with before her had said the same thing. You know, people were starting to question, is it not going to be possible for this child to speak? She recognized that, you know, he seemed nervous, more nervous and uncomfortable when she'd come into the room, right? An adult that he's not familiar with, someone that, you know, is new in the room, physically close to him, and that might be making him uncomfortable. So she said, you know what, like, we have access to this technology, the Presence platform. I'm going to try going into a different room from him, having him sit in a quiet space, log in through the screen, and I'm going to try doing this through teletherapy and take that physical stressor out of this. And she started doing it, and within 6 months, he was speaking multiple words. And it was just this huge breakthrough that, you know, required, number one, paying attention to his state of mind first before, you know, what does he need to be ready to receive the actual therapy, and then also, you know, breaking down some of our own beliefs and assumptions about, you know, what the right way or what the past way has been to try to do something.
So in closing, I'll say one thing that we hear, and I think specialty schools, we hope will expand for kids with disabilities, but it's like, are y'all a regular school? Like, are you a normal school? And of course I respond, yes, we offer all of the same subjects. We're, you know, under the state standards. But what I do see when our kids come, we actually have very little disciplinary problems. Not that it's perfect, not that sometimes we'll have a child with an issue from, you know, half of our kids at least have ADHD, if not more. But as so many of you here are involved in schools that are unique, that are tailored to individual needs, when we can recognize and really emphasize the dignity of who they are and affirm the child as an individual, that is the greatest gift that we can give them. And I so applaud everyone here. It's, again, just, it's so wonderful to hear the other stories and the work that you're doing, but that is the greatest health benefit for our children. So thank you all.
Thank you all so much. It's so inspiring to learn something new about what the Yamly is doing. Every time we come to these convenings, it's truly inspirational. And I can't wait to learn about our new cohort members. Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you, Janine, for this truly trajectory changing opportunity for all of us. Thank you very much.